the most productive 90 days of your life. Think back when you just hit this moment and the next 90 days were just like, you were unstoppable. So when I think about those 90-day sprints or 90-day periods, it was usually a point of disgust. Either A, maybe the business ran out of money. Like I'm thinking about one in particular time. It was like, holy shit, like what do I do now? Do I go bankrupt? Is this what I just call it in and go, I failed? Or do I go all in and get myself out of this rut? It's happened in my personal life where really low point in a relationship and it was just like, this is hell right now. What do? Do I just sit here and just feel sorry for myself? Or do I go, that's it. This is my point of disgust. I'm turning things around. So I think some of these negative emotions can actually drive us to make the changes that we need to make.
Welcome to the Best Half Show. This is a show all about how to make the second half of your life 10 times better than your first. I'm Mark Organ. I'm joined by my co-host, Roman Bodnarchuk, who's come back fired up from Florida, coming back from a great conference. And we're here to tell you all about the most important person to study if you want success in your life. Who's that?
It's you. I mean, we have to study ourselves. So, Mark, I've been, I guess, a conference junkie, since I was 21. I've been going about 4 a year. It's been a long time. And I think I've seen some of the best speakers in the world. But every time, Mark, I get one big idea. And for me, it's worth it. 4 days, I learn one thing.
I agree. One big idea is worth going to.
One big, and I'll tell you what it was this time. That's why I was so fired about today. We're so good at studying other people. But what about studying ourselves? Because if we can really learn about ourselves, our strengths and weaknesses, like really know it, we're gonna succeed. We're gonna do so much better. And I think most people don't spend any time studying themselves.
Yeah, I think there's differences in personality, and there's also differences in work style. And so that's what I've done a whole bunch of those. As CEO, I've done the MBTI test. I've done the DISC profile. I've done that, which is really a lot of that's about personality. And so entrepreneurs typically have a personality that is, they're more resilient. They take rejection well. They maybe have a little bit of megalomania, and they think they can do more than is possible. They're very optimistic,
Right.
type of people.
Yes.
So they've got about that, but they also have some deficits as well that can be a strength in the entrepreneurial environment. So they tend maybe not to be as steady. They don't really care very much about compliance.
Right.
As much, and that can get them in trouble. But then I think there's also work style as well. I mean, there's some people who really thrive in an environment, for example, that have low amounts of data, and they're okay. People at my company used to make fun of me, and they called me 2 data point organ. I was like, oh, I see 2 data points. Like, let's draw a line to them, and like, there's the trend, But there's some strength in that, right? To be able to say, okay, well, you know what? Do we have all the data? No. But there is a trend. We've got 2, maybe 3 data points, and let's keep going in that direction. And if we're wrong, we're wrong, and we'll change it. So I think entrepreneurs do that. Entrepreneurs are actually really good at understanding social rules. They understand political landscape, maybe in a way that entrepreneurial types don't understand as well, and are able to, play the game. Personally, I would find that horrible. I have had some time in life where I've worked for other people. It's not been wonderful, because the politics is a lot to handle. But for some people, they love that. They love that environment, and they really do well. They really succeed in that environment. They succeed at building the right kind of alliances, and doing well. So, one of probably many different axes about understanding yourself.
So let's talk about some easy ways to get to know yourself. So some of us have taken personality tests. There's tons online you can take. But I think maybe the best way, the first way, is to go to your closest family or friends. Let's say, like a best friend, for example, and ask them some questions. Like, hey, I need you to be really honest with me. What are the great attributes? What are the great strengths I have? Terrific. And people, I think, usually don't have a problem with that question. They love that one. But in the same questionnaire to your friend, asking, where are my weaknesses? Where are my blind spots? What do you, as a friend or a family member looking at me, where do you think I can improve? And listen for that feedback and encourage them to tell you, because I think it starts with really getting that feedback.
Okay. And I'm curious, like, what kind of feedback have you got for yourself? I mean, both positively and negatively. Have you asked this question of people?
Yeah, I have. So it's typical. It's not going to be surprising. Hardworking, smart. Always future. Ahead of future trends. And then when it gets to weaknesses, hates a lot of the rules. Especially these bureaucratic government rules that make no sense. Doesn't like the details of paperwork. Things that wouldn't be too shocking. But I think it's really important to get that feedback. And when I do the tests, I've done the Colby test and all these different. They're really helpful. I think these things are really helpful.
Yeah, let's actually, a bit of a segue in a Colby test because it's not very well known.
Right.
And I think part of it is it comes from a company called Colby. That's Kolbe. And you got to pay for it and whatnot. I think it's one of the most valuable things to take. I think everyone should take it, especially, for people here who are younger, or if you have children that are teenagers, like I had my kids take it. And it's really eye-opening because it talks about work style. And it's the only, they call it, not as opposed to a cognitive test, they call it a cognitive test.
Right.
And it's like, what environment do we feel most energized working in? So in terms of understanding whether you should work in a company, whether you should work for yourself, and even work for a company, what kind of company? Should you work at the post office or the government, or should you work at a, crazy Series A stage startup? What's going to be a better fit for you? Those are very different environments. And so I think everybody should take this test to understand.
I agree.
What kind of environment
I've done a lot of them. I think Mark, you're right. The Colby one's really good. And especially if you have to work with other people, which most of us do.
Yes. Yeah.
So then when their Colby score, are they a quick starter or not? Just how to get along with people. So I think it's really important anytime you have a team. And I don't think it's that expensive. People can do it online. I don't think it's that expensive.
I think it's $50.
Yeah. I think it's a great investment because sometimes, we get frustrated with others but we don't really understand their personality. And I think once you've done a Colby, it's much easier for you to relate to each other.
Right. Yeah. And to build that team. So I think Colby specifically talks about work style. And so like if you're building a team and let's say you want really effective diversity on the team, I don't mean the kind of diversity of like how many different shades of black and brown and white do I have on a team and genders and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's actually not the kind of diversity that's important in building a team. It's, do I have the right balance of thinking styles and work styles around that where it's harmonious? So we did that. I did that at Influitive where I found that there were maybe unsurprisingly too many people like me on the team. Entrepreneurial types. Why? Because maybe I like them because I'm like that too.
Yeah.
And it says, we really need more steady analytical people around. And it's actually one of the things that influenced me to say, let's make sure the candidate pool actually has folks like this and let's give some tests ahead of time and see that we have a good balance of people around.
I think I've never done it, but I think it'd be really neat from a relationship perspective. If you, I do use another tool online that it's designed for business, but I have done it for relationships called Crystal Knows. I don't know if you've ever used this, Mark.
No,
it's incredible. So long as they have a LinkedIn profile and are on some social media, it reads every social media post they've ever done their entire life, analyze it just based on the words they use and the frequency. And it gives you a very, very accurate assessment of their personality. How will you get along with
Notes,
them?
right? Yeah.
Crystal Knows. I find that incredibly accurate. I think Colby's probably better. Crystal Knows you can do it for free. But I do think even if you're dating or in a relationship, I think these would be really powerful tools as well.
For sure. Yeah. I think relationship success is all about I think you want your values to be in common with each other. So those should be ideally the same. But if you think about work style, for example, those would be good if they're different. So if you're more of a visionary, kind of a visionary sales entrepreneurial type, you probably don't want that same person in your partner.
Right.
It would be very exciting. So I'm sure that for the first year of your relationship, it would be absolutely awesome to have a female alter ego.
Yeah.
But then in terms of a long-term partnership, I think that's difficult. You're probably going to want somebody who's more steady, who's more compliant, and gets the details right, executes well under your leadership kind of thing would be a better fit.
I agree. So step one in terms of getting to know yourself is getting some feedback from friends or family, doing one of these tests. There's lots of different tests. And then the next part of knowing yourself is having a really clear idea of what we want. And when I say really clear idea, I'm talking about an immense detail where I could literally close my eyes and visualize what I want, and it emotionally drives me. And I think sometimes people write their goals out. Maybe it's New Year's Eve, they write their goals out, but they really haven't got it to a point where they can close their eyes, they can visualize that, and they're emotionally charged by it. So I think that's really important to document that.
It's huge, yeah. So I use a process called Vivid Vision that I learned, and it's more for the business side of things, but you can do it just as much for a personal side. And really, it is just that. It's like this very vivid, painted picture of what your future looks like. Down to the details. So from a business perspective, it's what does my office look like? Every single function, sales, marketing, whatever. How is it going to work? Like, even in my business specifically, we even talked about the individual offices and said this is going to be a legitimate tourist attraction in Toronto as part of and it actually was true. People did actually come to visit it. It was a pretty cool office. So like getting very very clear about the details. I learned to do it 3 years out, but on a personal level, that might not be enough time. Like you probably need something that's 10 years out. But the 3 years, the reason why people have picked that who study visions is that it's just far enough away where you can dream pretty big.
Yeah,
You can do a lot in 3 years if you really put your mind to it. But yet it's close enough where it's like you've got to get going today because that 3 years will be gone before you know it.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I also like, Mark, I know as humans, we think in pictures, and sometimes we do our vision or we do our goals. We just write it down. What I find and what I did in the Hamptons, they love to give you magazines. I guess it's every company wants to just get magazines in front of these people. So I was like ripping out all these pictures of things that motivated me. And I find that when you actually have pictures, and that's what vision boards are usually made up of, they drive you even faster. And I think a lot of people know about vision boards. They do this. The next step is where I think most people don't do it. So let's pretend I want to, spend my summers on a 100-foot yacht in Saint-Tropez or, some, amazing place. That's great. I've got a clear idea of that. But the next step is, are you willing to do what it takes to get that lifestyle? And this is where I find most of them, they miss that step, where they've got this great idea of all these dream things that they want, but they're not willing to do that's going to take 12 hours a day, 6 days a week for the next X amount of years to execute on that. They want to work 4 hours a day. They want to get up at 10. You know what I mean? They want to go out drinking every night. Like they're not willing to pay the price. So just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, if you like this episode, I would encourage you to hit the like button. Please make some comments. Like, we really want to meet some of you guys.
Yeah, listen, we'd love you to subscribe. Leave us some comments. And we are planning some pretty fun parties coming up. So maybe we'll invite you. So yeah, please subscribe, give us a comment, and we look forward to meeting you in person as well.
Well, I guess first on the vision boards, yeah. I mean, going in pictures makes a lot of sense. That drives action more. Yeah, in terms of, it's so interesting. You've sort of framed it in terms of, I want to spend my summers really relaxing and enjoying it. In order to do that, I need to really work my ass off really hard today.
Right.
So I wonder how you, because it's funny, like in my visions, I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about relaxation side of things. So I'm not sure I relate to that as
well.
much.
Let me give you one you can relate to. So let's say you have an image of the perfect body. So I don't know, the guy on the cover of Men's Health this month, I want that guy's abs, right? So you have a pretty clear idea. This is what I want. I'm going to move towards that. But you also know what you've got to do every day and what you can't do every day, like things you cannot eat and things you can't, do. So that's what I'm talking about. And I find most will have these great vision boards, but what they're missing is all things they've got to cut out of their lives and all things they've got to double down on.
Yeah, that I agree with. I think that's true both for personal and for business. So I'm curious to know how you do that. I learned a process called OKRs, or objectives and key results, that was popularized first by Andy Grove at Intel, and then John Doerr brought that to Google. And so Google has now popularized this method. which I really like. So let's say you have a vision for what it is that you want. And so you turn that into strategies, right? So let's just say for your business, it's, I need to be the number one thought leader in my space. I need to have a powerful community that drives value for all the members. And I need to have a service that people really love and they keep coming back again and again. So I have really high retention and growth. Maybe a standard sort of for a business like, businesses like yours or mine.
Yeah.
So how does that now translate into the objectives that I have? So let's say around community. Okay, so that's I want a community that's going to really attract people and provide a lot of value, folks. Okay, well, what are some of the results that I would expect from that? So I would need, first of all, I would need to have at least 10,000 people in my community, let's just say.
Right.
I would need to have minimum 20% of them logging in every single day.
Mm-hmm.
So you break this down into results. What I learned is you need a good mix of what are called upstream and downstream goals. So like an upstream goal, let's say around community, would be that I need to personally interact with, let's say, 20 people a day. Mm-hmm. So that's upstream because it's not really translated into results yet.
Right. But
it's my activity. So those are my activity.
Yeah.
And then as a result, I have people who are now really, really engaged. So that I think is maybe people just don't have this understanding of saying, okay, this is my vision. If I have this vision, these are the strategies that I need in order to accomplish that vision.
Yeah.
And then those strategies directly turn into what my objectives are, which in turn, you then have key results. And what I've learned is sort of 4 to 6 key results per objective is what works. You can't have too many.
I think you're right. I think people are missing the strategies. And the next part they're missing is, okay, so I want to be a thought leader. I want to have this community. All right, so I know that every week I need to produce a new podcast. And maybe we do that on Mondays. And every Tuesday I need to produce a really well-written blog post. And every Wednesday I need to, so you think about the content you've got to create, and you're creating a daily schedule. So now I got to do 4 hours to prepare for this or 6 hours. So now you're creating those daily habits because you're going to produce that content, which is going to be required to become that thought leader.
Right. And I think you need to have specific, numerical goals. So say, I need to produce a really good blog post. What does really good mean? Like you have to put it in numbers.
Right.
So yeah, I had this with, I had a client who's like, I need to put out a new website, a good website. Well, how are you going to measure that? Is it going to be the number of eyeballs you get? Is it going to be, so I went through different options. And finally, the best way to measure that is the number of people who fill out a form saying they want to learn more information. Okay. So that is actually the goal. The goal is not to produce a website. The goal in this case is to produce something that generates at least 25 inquiries a month. And that's how we know it's good, because it's funneling people to the right place.
Right, you can measure it.
So I think that's a good thing to think about when you're thinking about how to translate your objectives into goals, is how do they make them specific? How do I make them numerical?
So your example, if I need a community of 10,000 people, okay, great. So let's say that's a 3-year goal. Now let's work backwards. How long is it going to take? How many do I need to do every week, every month, et cetera? Yeah. So, and I think it's that planning process, but it goes down to your daily ritual. Like, here's what I got to do every day to hit my week goal, my monthly goal. And this is where I find most people are lacking. What have you found? Has that been your experience?
And they may be lacking for a number of reasons. They may actually know what their goals are, and they just don't hit them because they're distracted by different things.
Right, the distractions.
And so that might be a function of maybe not having a strong enough sense of purpose. Okay, so you want to write a book. You want to be a thought leader. Why? A lot of people have that idea, but they don't have a really good sense as to why they really want to do it. And as a result, their motivation starts flagging after a while. I've written a book. It's hard. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
But in my case, it was, I wrote it it's called The Messenger is the Message. It's
a great book.
It's a book that was, the idea is how to get your customers to do all the selling and marketing for you.
Right.
And I wrote that as part of my business. And part of it was that, I really wanted to open up entirely new people to my ideas. I needed to get it done on time because I had a conference and I had an image of myself signing autographs of my book at my event.
Right.
That's what really pushed me. And it happened. The cool
Right.
thing is it happened. There was a long line of people who
Yeah.
actually wanted autographs. And so to your point about that vision, I had this vision of myself signing these autographs, and it pushed me really out of my comfort zone. And I found that the other thing I found is I couldn't work at home and I couldn't work at work on the book. So I went to every single Jimmy's Coffees in Toronto, different one every week.
Yeah.
I blocked off 3 hours of time, and that was my time. Phone was off,
Yeah.
and that was my time to write. So shut off the distractions, had a powerful sense of purpose, connected it to a why now. So you need a why and a why now. I mean, as an experienced sales professional, you've done a lot of sales. You need both the why and the why now to convince people to buy.
Right.
You also need it to convince yourself. Like essentially, you're convincing yourself to buy. You have so many things you can do with your time. The why now, I think, really, really helps you. And then I think we've talked about a forcing function. So we did that for fitness by hiring a photographer.
Right.
For my book, essentially it says, I've got a conference. It would be way better to have my own books at my own conference instead of saying, give me your QR code, I'll ship you one in a month.
Yeah.
It's just way better to have those books, ready. So having a forcing function, I think, really helps.
I think the book's a great example. So I've done a few books. And I think what's great about the book is it forces you to crystallize your thinking. And from that, you can turn into blog posts and all kinds of content. But I think the book is a great example. Another thing I just wanted to talk about is going back to taking that goal. So if I'm going to write a book, and I'll give you an example of Tim Ferriss. He just took a 4-month sabbatical from his podcast just to focus on his book, because he realized he needed to put 100% of his focus and his energy into the book. And I think it's really true. When you're going to go for a big goal, it's really difficult to kind of go, oh, I'll spend half my day on that. It doesn't really work. Yeah. You've really got to go in on that big objective.
Yeah, which is hard because we do have other priorities in life. I mean, good for Tim to do that he was able to be there. I couldn't take time off of my work as CEO to write this book. Like, I had to do both. That said, I really did have to put a different hat on. So everyone in my company knew, like, Wednesday afternoon, I was unavailable. And people would try to text, email, like, hey, we need you to do this, and we need you to do that, and all this shit's going on. I said, look, I hired you guys to do this work yourself.
Right.
This time is unavailable. I am not a manager. I'm a maker.
Yeah.
In this time, and so I think when you're on maker time, you have to really close out all the management responsibilities, all the other people in your life that need you. But yeah, it would be really nice, and for sure, people have had success by taking a sabbatical, or taking even 2 weeks off to just focus on nothing but this piece of work.
Yeah, and I'm doing that now, Mark. Because I told you on our last episode, I'm doing this 10x thing on my own personal life, and part of it is I had to take my existing business and I'm taking a sabbatical from it, where I'm not going to devote very much time to it, where I can put all of my time and energy in this new mastermind program I want to do, because it's going to take that kind of focus. I'm not good at multitasking, Mark. I got to go all in on one task and really succeed at it. And it's a whole new world for me. Like this, I'm going to try to do something I've never done before. So again, for me, I'm going that whole route where I've got to put everything else aside.
Yeah.
So I think it's important.
You're much more likely to have success that way.
I agree. So let's talk about some other things that I thought were really interesting, what I learned in my seminar. So we'll call this the 4 levels. And I don't know, Graham, will we be able to show this on the podcast as well? So we've got a little pyramid, and on the bottom of the pyramid is really survival. And I find, Mark, that's where most people live. They're trying to pay their bills, groceries, mortgage, rent, cars, survival mode. And very few people get to the next stage, and the next stage is the status. So maybe now they have a home, but now it's a nicer home, or they have a car, maybe it's a nicer home, or they've got clothes, but now they're nicer. So I find that most will kind of jump between survival and status. And sometimes you're there, but they kind of bounce around. The next one is freedom, where they don't have to report to anybody. They don't have to come in every day, 9 to 5. It's more that freedom stage where they can determine what they do every day. And the last one is purpose. I know we spoke a bit about this before, but let's talk about your perspective on this pyramid.
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting that they have this as a pyramid. I don't see it so much as a pyramid, which is like you need to do one, and until you can't get to the next one until you do the one, you have to Once you accomplish status, then you can think about having freedom. I mean, I think that if a big reason for success in life is that you are willing to take massive action, you are willing to not engage in so many of the incredibly engaging distractions that are out there, and able to focus on something important. It's probably pretty important to be thinking about these things all the time. And even early in your careers, think about, well, what am I all about? And what would give me a lot of satisfaction to accomplish? Maybe even if I don't make a lot of money at it, but it's something that just drives me. Because one of the things that I've seen in my life is that when people do things that are in line with their purpose, they do find a way to do well.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because they're more charismatic and magnetic, and people can feel that. People can experience it, and they can say, this person really believes in what they're doing. It doesn't feel like they're working. It feels like they're really enjoying things.
Yeah, and I think sometimes in life, Mark, you've got to try a whole bunch of things, especially when you're younger, to figure out what is it that I really like to do, and sometimes you have to go through like 10 shitty jobs before you go like, oh, I really like that one. Or you got to launch a bunch of businesses and those failed, but this one really worked. So I think it takes time. Our show is really about the second half of your life. And usually by the second half, you figured out, hey, I'm really good at this. And this drives me. And this is like what I love to do. And that's usually, what I believe when you do your best work, when you figured out what you're really good at and what you're passionate about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, a lot of my purpose is wrapped up in the ability to truly inspire people. I want to inspire people, especially to go and build great businesses, great companies, so I think building the second half of their life, I think, is part of that mission and why I'm doing this podcast. But I think it's something that it's important to regularly think about. If you're going to, for example, go on a vacation somewhere, to dedicate a day or two to have some deep thinking as to why am I here, right? Why am I really here? Am I just here because am I just here to consume? Am I just here because I want to spend more time on vacation and enjoy things? Well, probably not. I mean, that's nice to have, but there's probably something deeper. And I think if you can really access that and think about it a lot and design your life so that your every step that you take is in line with that, I think you probably are going to end up having more of that status and freedom that I think all of us would love to have more about that and more of that in our work life. But I think you get more of that when the actions you take are in line with your purpose.
I agree. And I think this is not just about business. I mean, it's in your personal life. So if you want to be a great father, a great brother, a great son, whatever it is, having that purpose, and it breaks down to, what are my daily habits? So if I want to be a great father, what do I have to do today? If I want to be a great son, a great, whatever it is, and because then now you're going to put the right time and commitment into those things. So I think having the purpose is important for your business and also for your personal life.
Right.
The next chart I want to put up, Mark, I thought this was really great, and we all need that personal checklist of assessment. Where am I at today? So, Graham, we're going to put this chart up. It's called Force and Power. So, for example, low on the chart, and we all have these days, and sometimes we feel shame, humiliation, we're miserable. Well, that's pretty low in the chart. Other days we might feel pride. There's different ways on this chart how you feel. I know it's your first time looking at this chart, but what are your, again, just from a daily check-in, hey, where am I at today? Or maybe it's checking in with a coworker or checking in with a child. Hey, where are you at on this chart today?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, so you went to this event.
Yes.
I think you have a better sense. Like when I look at this, I don't know what to do with it yet. So maybe you could tell me, like, how would you use this?
Yes.
And how would you recommend that our audience use this in order to improve their life?
So if you're on the bottom half of the chart, which is called force, so the words that you don't want to be feeling are shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride. These are the ones that are not going to drive you in the direction that you want to get to. Okay. The ones that you want to feel are things like courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace. That's where you're trying to move up the scale. Okay. And it's super hard. Like we all have bad days, bad hours, bad weeks. But it's important that we assess, okay, where am I at? Okay, well, I'm in a fearful state. Right now, I've got anxiety. I'm frightened of this. Okay, understood. Here's where we're at. Now how do we get out of that state? But I think sometimes we need a tool like a self-assessment, go, see, I'm at this stage right now, and I need to move up this ladder.
Yeah, no, I think well, a lot of these tools really are quite reductive, right? They're simplistic, and maybe they have to be. And I know I've built tools like this before, so I know you can't reflect all the complexity of things. I mean, I think probably most people feel a mix of things. I know I do. So like right now, do I feel guilt? Yes. I have stuff to do. I have things that really should have been done 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I'm here,
Right.
And not getting that done.
Right.
But I also feel other things. I feel some pride. I feel love for the people in my life that I care about. So it's a mix of things. So I don't really know what to do if I'm feeling some things that are low down. Like, what are the tools that I use to get out of that?
Okay,
I don't really know.
so let's give an example. And I don't think these are always bad. Sometimes these are the driving force that let us make the decision that's life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think about a time, the most productive 90 days of your life, think back when you hit this moment and the next 90 days were just like, you were unstoppable. So when I think about those 90-day sprints or 90-day periods, it was usually a point of disgust. Either maybe the business ran out of money. Like I'm thinking about one in particular time. It was like, holy shit, like what do I do now? Do I go bankrupt? Is this what I just call it in and go, I failed? Or do I go all in and get myself out of this rut? It's happened in my personal life where really low point in a relationship and it was just like, this is hell right now. What do I do? Do I just sit here and just feel sorry for myself? Or do I go, that's it. This is my point of disgust. I'm turning things around. So I think some of these negative emotions can actually drive us to make the changes that we need to make.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, what it says at the bottom may not see on the screen, but the key to advancing in your personal and business life is accepting your past and getting closure on the things that create guilt and shame. So that's interesting. So maybe what it is being introspective about these areas that are in force. So I feel fear or I feel apathy. Why do I feel that? What's going on there that makes me feel that? And then can I get what they call closure on that and say, well, this is why I feel that, but this is why this is no longer going to be part of my life. That was in the past. We're looking forward to the future.
Yeah.
We're going to create a different state, here in the future. And so we can move from fear to moving into something else. And I mean, they have fear as one bar here. I think this whole thing here is like fear is big. Fear is something that is absolutely fundamental to all living things. I mean, all animals anyway, and maybe even plants have a level of fear. And when we're in a state of fear, we are often paralyzed and we make poor decisions and whatnot. So that's why I think that is important. Why are we fearful or these other things? Why are we angry? Which is really just part of fear.
Yeah.
All these things are. And say, okay, this is the reason, so I could think of like, maybe we could even a couple examples of when we were fearful, we moved out of that. I can think of, from my first company when you were around at Eloqua, when we were going to be running out of money in 4 months. So that was pretty fearful, right? And we were going to lay off all of our people. We were going to have a lot of shame and guilt as a result of that. But the reason why we had the situation was that we didn't have enough customers. That was the problem. And we didn't have enough customers because we didn't know which customers were going to be the best fit for us. So that was the problem. So what we need to do is solve that problem. So we had to sit down as a team and say, what are the best customers for us to go after? And then we need a plan for here's how we're going to go and win them. Now we're starting to generate some action and we're moving out of a state of fear. And now we're actually getting to a place where we're pretty excited because every day we're taking steps to win more of the right kind of customers for us. And eventually get into that stage. So maybe we've kind of figured it out as a result of this conversation is kind of wallow in a negative emotion for a bit, understand why you have it. So you take it from like the emotional part of your brain, which is inaccessible to language, which by the way, I think is the only reason why therapy works at all. I'm not a big fan of therapy, but this is one thing that therapy is good at, It's putting language around our emotion so that we can access it. And we go, oh, that's why we're fearful. We're fearful because we think the government is going to put us in a concentration camp unless we take their medicine. Okay.
Right.
Now that and this actually was literally something that a coach helped me do, is figure out, oh, now that I've said that, right, we can actually design a system around that so we get out of that state of fear and we can get into a state of going into massive action and having the positive emotions that we want.
Hi, it's Roman Bodnarchuk from the Best Half Show. Today is all about 10xing your life, 10xing your health, 10xing your business, 10xing your income. Our entire show is about making the second half of your life 10 times better than your first. But today we want you to 10x your algorithms. By you pressing subscribe right now on the Best Half Show, all of a sudden, the feed that you get from Apple, from YouTube, from Spotify will change. You're going to get content like ours, content that will help you 10x your life. So press subscribe now and 10x your life. So these are great examples, Mark. I thought of two in my personal life that were always at the stage. So one is the company, we'd raised venture capital money. We ran out of money, even though we were doing really well. The company was growing quickly, but all of a sudden we're out of cash. I was like, holy shit. But that when we ran out of cash, I had the holy shit moment. I realized, okay, what are the clients that I love and really motivate me? Because if I'm super motivated with that client, we're just going to do better. Because there were clients that were just driving us crazy too, that we just didn't like, and took a lot of resources and just weren't driving us to where we want. And that holy shit moment was we were able to define, hey, let's really zone in on this type of client because we do great and we just enjoy them more. So that was my business one. On a personal one, which was far more difficult, by the way, the shame and the guilt for me from my divorce was epic. Like never had I felt more pain and suffering from that divorce. Just the shame and it was horrendous. And it took me years to get over that. And the worst for me was how I felt guilty about my children. Because this wasn't about me, it was about my 3 kids. And that was really, really difficult. And it wasn't till years after the divorce, I hit a moment where I'm like, I've got to let go of this guilt and I got to move on. But you've got to hit that point where you're just like, okay, I feel that emotion. It's valid. Like it's a legitimate, reason I'm feeling guilty about the kids. But I'm not going to help my kids. I'm not going to help my family if I'm stuck in that state. I've got to transcend that. Go, okay, I acknowledge that feeling. It's legitimate. But now what am I going to do about it? How am I going to be the great father, the great leader I want to be? But I think it's important that we do recognize these things. And then sometimes we hit that point and then we make the change. We make the decision.
Yeah, that's a great story. No, I think that's one of the most important reasons why you need to understand yourself, because otherwise, how do you surround yourself with the right kind of people that you need? And yeah, I've got an interesting story around that. And it was actually also when it was very early days when I was running Eloqua and I was running out of money and again, no customers and that usual thing. And I went to my father, who's an experienced entrepreneur, and I said, Dad, what do I do? I'm in big trouble. And he says, son, you need to understand yourself. I'm like, you need to know yourself. I'm like, what does that mean, Dad? I'm like, out of money in a month. I'm not going to be able to pay my people. And he's like, go home and think about that. I want you to go home and really think about you and your nature. And didn't tell me anything else. He didn't say, well, because you need to know who else to hire. You need to know what kind of customers you want. But I kind of came to that realization myself, right? Is that we only succeed when we have a force multiplier around us. And we understand that better when we know ourselves. So I was lucky to get that when I was younger. I was 24, right? So that was nice to be able to think about that at that time.
And to help our audience, Mark, what we decide to do is we're going to create a questionnaire. It's about 16 questions, and people do this on their own. And they're very powerful questions. It'll take some time for people to think about it. But once they do this, it's really it's an audit. It's like a personal identity audit. It's really going to be helpful for people. So it's something we're going to put on the website, thebesthalfshow.com, and we hope to have that up by the time this episode airs. So just to close out, Mark, any final comments about why we think the most important person to study is not other people, it's actually yourself? Any final comments on this?
Yeah, well, my friend of all, Ravikant, has said, life is a single player game.
Right.
And it really is true. I mean, even if you have a life partner, you have a business partner that you've been in business, like Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett have been
Yeah.
together for decades.
Yeah.
People who've been married for many years. At the end of the day, like you're going to die alone, right?
Yeah. It's us against us.
And
Yeah.
so if you're going to be successful in life, it's really all about you and your ability to maximize the strengths that you've been given, and to minimize the weaknesses that you have. And you do that by putting yourself into an environment that accentuates your strengths and blunts your weaknesses. So yeah, I think success in life really does start with an understanding of yourself.
I agree. And I think sometimes forgiving ourselves for some of our weaknesses, so we can really, accentuate what we're great at. I think it just puts us in a better state to succeed. So with that, join us at thebesthalfshow.com, where we're going to put our 16 points or 16 questions that are going to help you in terms of your own personality audit. And we think it's going to be really beneficial for you. So thank you for joining us on the Best Half Show. And don't forget to subscribe.